Testing. You guys get the big voice. Big voice today. Oh, I could do, what's that stuff? ASMR. Hello. No. Okay. All right. I am so excited to be here and to be part of this conversation. I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you for supporting this Iris Lab conversation with our two amazing theater artists. I want to say hello to all of our folks that are joining us on HowlRound. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today and be part of this artist conversation. So welcome everyone to MENA Theater Makers Modeling Possibility and Resistance, where I'm with our amazing artists Torange Yeghiazarian and Evren Odcikin. If we have not met before, my name is LisaMarie Rollins, and I'm a professor here, assistant professor of playwriting and Black drama, and I also run the new play festival here and have a research lab called the Iris Lab. And the Iris Lab is a research residency space and a new work incubator for global majority theater makers located right here. And this is our inaugural year, and this is the final event of our inaugural year of artist residencies and theater maker experimental inquiry. So I want to send some shout outs really quick to the people who sponsored us and helped us today. And so the UC Arts Division, CMO, SOMECA, the Arts Research Institute, the Experimental Theater Maker Cluster, the Department of Performance, Play, and Design, and of course our partners, HowlRound Theater Commons, for all their support and help making this happen. I'm going to introduce our artists to you all, so just bear with me. They are very esteemed, so there's a lot going on. First, I want to introduce Evren Odcikin. Evren is a Turkish-American director, writer, and arts leader with a commitment to championing historically excluded stories and voices in the American theater. And he's also the proud 24/25 artist in residence at Golden Thread Productions in San Francisco. His work is heart-centered, globally minded, politically engaged, and centers joy as resistance. As a director, his work has been seen all over, and I don't even think I have the most recent stuff in London and Prague, but Oregon Shakespeare Festival, Macbeth, and Mona Mansour's Unseen, Christopher Oscar Pena's Our Orange Sky at Profile Theater, Marin Theater, Harvey Fierstein's Torch Song, Sylvia Corey's Selling Kabul, Amir Nazir Zouabi's This Is Who I Am, and much, much, much more. As well as work at Berkeley Rep, GAVA, South Coast Rep, Kennedy Center, The Lark, and also much, much more. As a playwright and translator, he has been commissioned and produced by Cal Shakes, NYU Abu Dhabi, Golden Thread Theater, Crowded Fire Theater, shout out Crowded Fire Theater, and Custom Made Theater. And he served as the interim artistic director at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, where he had been the associate artistic director and director of artistic programming since 2019. Evren is the founder of MAIA Directors and serves on the boards of Middle Eastern North African Theater Makers Alliance and Playwrights Foundation. Let's give it up for Evren. And I'm so happy to have with us Torange Yeghiazarian, who is a playwright, director, translator, arts leader. Torange's writing is featured in new Iranian plays, Middle Eastern American theater, Performing Iran, Salam, Peace, an anthology of Middle Eastern American drama, and Casting a Movement, among others. She's translated works by leading contemporary Iranian playwrights, including Naghmeh Samini, Mohammad Yagoubi, and Reza Saror, and adapted to the stage a short story by Iran's modernist master, Sagde Hedyat, poems by leading feminist Simin Bebehaneh, and classical romance poetry by Nizami, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Torange is the founding artistic director emeritus of Golden Thread Productions, the first American theater company devoted to the Middle East, and serves on the board of the Consortium of Asian American American theaters and artists. Torange has been recognized by Theater Bay Area Theater Communications Group as a legacy leader of color. She was honored by the Cairo International Theater Festival and the Symposium on Equity in the Entertainment Industry at Stanford. Please welcome the esteemed Torange Yeghiazarian. Yeah, I cannot tell you. I've had an opportunity to work with both Golden Thread, Torange, and Evren in previous years in San Francisco and in Oakland, and I got to direct at Golden Thread, and so I got to know these two amazing humans very well, and I just really want to thank you for your time and our conversation today and for being here. Yeah. So, for those who might not be familiar, we'll probably switch back and forth a little bit between saying MENA Theater and SWANA Theater. There's sort of a transition, you know how we continually rename ourselves as people of color as we decolonize more and more. Middle Eastern, North African is one way that folks have been identifying theater from the Middle East and North Africa, but also SWANA means Southwest Asian and North Africa, which is a new sort of decolonial term for the region, also known as MENA. So we'll kind of go back and forth between those two just to kind of give you all a little grounding there. And then, so I want to start with just sort of saying the impetus for this conversation was one of the goals of the Iris Lab is, and my work as a theater maker is really to consider how the action of doing the work and focusing on global majority artists is a certain kind of insistence that insists upon humanity of the people who we're working with and working for. And I use insistence in the way that Amara Tabor Smith does, to say that insisting is also a methodology of how to create art and how to, the philosophy of how you're in the room, how you are operating with one another, and insisting on our whole selves to be cared for and thought of as wholly human. And so I've been thinking a lot about what that insisting and that act of insisting means in American theater, and what it means for resisting Western forms of theater, but also even just traditional theater making, and that this resistance and this thinking about other possibilities or even living in different lineages of theater making provides us with some kind of opportunity to insist upon and model the kind of world that we want to live in, and also the kind of world that we always want to be building. So that's a place that we're going to be beginning from and for this whole conversation, and that it's going to be kind of holding, and so we might refer to possibility and resistance and modeling and all those things throughout. But I want to start with asking both of you about your early years as a theater artist, and maybe what drew you to theater, and then what drew you to new plays. Because part of our audience is students here and folks that are early in their artistic careers, and we're going to talk a little bit about growth and pivoting as well, but I'd really love to hear what brought you to the theater. What sucked you in?
First of all, thanks so much for having me here. It's great to be in community with you all. I was the kid that did theater all the time. Growing up, clowning around, dancing, singing, making up stories, and eventually I formulated it into something that I would hand to people to perform, and you know, from school plays to high school in the U.S. and then college. Being an immigrant child, it was important to me to be able to make money when I graduate college, so I did not pursue theater as a career. I became a microbiologist, which I also love, but that I made money working in a hospital and then later in biotech, but continued doing theater all along. First as an actor, then I began writing my own material because I didn't like what was available there for women actors. I didn't like representations of Iran and Iranians. I'm born in Iran of Armenian heritage. And so I began writing my own material. Then I began writing plays in English for other people to perform. And so it sort of was a very organic, gradual evolution. And when I came, I grew up on the East Coast, moved to San Francisco to go to graduate school for theater. By that time, I had decided that I do want to pursue theater as a career, and eventually got my master's. And by that time, I felt a real personal, deep commitment to telling MENA stories, because I wasn't seeing them being told, and U.S. engagement in the Middle East. Like U.S. has been engaged in the Middle East politically for decades, and I felt like you know, Americans really have no idea of reality of life in the Middle East, yet our political decisions have such impact on the lives of people in the Middle East, and I felt the need to really tell our stories in our own words. That's sort of the impetus for creating Golden Thread. It came out of my graduate thesis from San Francisco State, and then evolved into a company that was not just my artistic home, but became an artistic home and a real national anchor, I would say, for all MENA theater artists.
I have more to ask you about Golden Thread, but I'm going to let Evren respond a little bit too.
Adding my thanks for inviting us to be part of this. It's really, really exciting. Anytime I get to be in conversation with my mentor friend, the reason for my having a career in the American theater, Torange, it's always a joy. So like Torange, I was a hammy little kid that had too much energy. I was born and raised in Turkey. And my parents, my whole family were math and science people who did art on the side. And I'm the only one I studied computer science, math and science and engineering, and then somehow decided that I would actually put the art in the center. And I always joke that my big coming out conversation with my mom was actually about becoming a theater maker. And her response was like, your brother and I were wondering when you were going to figure that out. So, you know, they've been incredibly supportive, especially as I'm the immigrant and they have such fears for me in terms of financial security, healthcare, and all those things. Despite all that, I've had a great support from family. But yeah, I was a hammy kid, always acted in school, elsewhere. And it was in high school, Gerard Kennedy, who was running the theater program in my high school, Robert College, that sort of looked at me and went, I think you might be a director, and sort of handed me a short, weird, funny play that was making fun of Beckett. and What Where is the Beckett show, and this one was called What Where Are the Tomatoes, and I was really excited as a 17-year-old because my friends and I basically got to stage this thing and like squeeze tomatoes on stage and make a mess, and it was awesome, and I never looked back really. But yeah, so directing sort of became my main mode of sort of storytelling. And I think, like many young male directors, I think I started because I wanted to tell everyone what to do. And then, sure, you know, why not? And it sort of developed pretty quickly once, especially I found my sort of artistic home at Golden Thread with Torange, into much more of a communal exercise. So my journey, I feel like over the 20 years of my career, has been about like, how do you tell our stories, whatever R might be in that specific room, in a way that centers community, that centers humanity, while also holding a high level of rigor in place so that we are holding ourselves up to a standard artistically, while also taking care of people and not repeating stereotypes, or as you sort of in your introduction talked about, insisting on sort of our own humanity in the ways that we work. And then through Golden Thread, I sort of started producing, and leadership spaces started opening, both in advocacy spaces and producing theater. And Nataki Garrett at Oregon Shakespeare Festival was kind enough to hire me and invite me up there as Associate Artistic Director at Oregon Shakespeare Festival in 2019, where I was there for about 5 years. And it was a huge, it's a huge company, does classical, new works, has a real leadership space within the EDI conversations, within the American theater. And so that was an amazing experience. And I sort of don't run anything right now, but I consider myself an artistic leader forever, because that's sort of, that kind of structural thinking and leadership thinking has always been not just an interest, but something I think I'm good at and always try to bring to any conversation. And now I'm directing, writing, and I go wherever people pay me to go to tell my stories,
Amen. Yeah, as we do. And so I just want to point out a couple things. The fact of the push against the narrative that if you were a real artist, you would quit your job and be broke. Like, that is not what all of us had some sort of job that sustained us for a while until we were able to move over into being a full-time theater maker. And so I just want to, I think that it's something that is also becoming more and more of a reality with our economic, position in the United States. But just to say that I think it's something that we should talk more about in terms of how we can sustain ourselves and establish a foundation of care for ourselves, and financially doing that. Before we dive into just fully doing our work. So I just want to say, you all can say anything to that you want, but I just wanted to share. Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I think it's important for us to name also I'll speak from the I statement. I was an immigrant. I never had a financial safety net. So for me, it was a real survival need, because it's not like I could move back home if I did not make my rent. My parents in Turkey were not making any money compared to what I was making in the US. So in a weird way, that sort of self-sustaining aspect of being a little bit pragmatic about what life might be like. And also, I had some early access to seeing the economics of art making and who were the overnight successes and what kind of privilege they were coming from, and the unspoken ways that money moves behind the scenes, whether it be your generational wealth or you're married to someone who actually has a job. There's so many different ways artists make that work. And I realized I couldn't necessarily do any of those things early in my career, so I had to go through it a different way. And it did mean that it was a little slower, I will say that, and I had to sort of make sense of the fact that I wasn't going to be doing those things maybe in my early 30s. I was going to get to live the life I'm living now in my mid 40s, and it took 15, 20 years of building that groundwork to be able to do it. But again, I think, especially recently with social media, etc., we really love an overnight success. We really love the narrative of people who, you know, make it when they're 14 out of nowhere. And that happens. There are people who get to do that, and it's amazing. It's just, I knew that wasn't my life. And so it's been actually kind of satisfying over the last few years, as difficult as everything is, to feel like I'm able to step into a plan that has been underway for 20 years. And again, it relied on the generosity of many folks, right, along the way. It's not an individualistic, it's actually the community you build and you find, the mentors you find, the opportunities you're given by others. And that's actually the work of career building, not what you're directing always, right? It's not the credit, it's the people, if that makes sense.
Torange, you spoke about founding Golden Thread, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what felt really important to you about founding Golden Thread, but also what surprised you maybe about how the company evolved, its impact on American theater, and then I also, if you could talk a little bit about New Threads and what do the women say, and then I do have a video also of Isafan Blues, so if we want to show any of that.
I mean, Golden Thread really came out of a personal need for an artistic home and a place where I could basically produce my own work. So that's where it started from, and it was clear that, you know, the theater people that I saw in the Bay Area that were around me either were not interested in the stories that I wanted to tell or didn't know how to tell them. So either way, I felt that it basically felt on me to tell the stories. As soon as we started Golden Thread Productions, so the first project that we did was a contemporary adaptation of Lysistrata. That was my master's thesis. The adaptation was bringing Palestinian and Israeli women together to go on a sex strike. This is 1996, and you know that shit continues. But thank you. And the title, it's a comedy. The title was Operation No Penetration. It was produced on a zero budget with everyone's goodwill and sweat and tears. And we had zero marketing budget, but we sold out 6 performances. And you know, the audience response was very enthusiastic. We got a terrible review in, I think, SF Weekly, which broke my heart, but it wasn't untrue. And so it gave me more energy to improve my work and focus on, okay, what were the shortcomings and how can I do this better? I wasn't initially sure that the company would continue. When I said, from the beginning, I said Middle Eastern American theater. I didn't want it to be an Iranian theater. I didn't want it to be an Armenian theater. There already was an Iranian theater in the Bay Area. I wanted to do work in English because I wanted the broadest audience possible, and I wanted to tell all the stories of the Middle East because I feel that we are a community, and together we have a louder voice and we have more power, and we can support each other and lift each other up. Within a year, I think it was as soon as we basically had a website, people started sending in plays, and it became very clear that there are amazing playwrights out there, in the same shoe as I am, that they're they have amazing plays, but that are not being produced. In fact, one of our playwrights shared with me that he changed his Arabic name into something that didn't sound Arabic just to see if his play might be selected. So this is, late 1990s. The thing that catapulted, so two things happened. One was that very quickly I realized we can't claim to represent the diversity of the Middle East by just producing one or two plays. So what might be a program that could represent more voices and more diversity of the Middle East? So in 1999, we launched the Reorient Festival, which is a festival of short plays. So that enabled us to, in one evening, tell multiple stories from different perspectives. And we quickly learned that, in fact, the plays in one evening are in a way in dialogue with each other. So even though we didn't have a theme per se, other than everything was by or about the Middle East, the way the plays, we selected the plays to be in dialogue with each other, thematically, aesthetically, in terms of perspective. You want to play a...
Yeah, you
and so in 2001, what happened in 2001? Do people remember? So we were scheduled to stage Reorient Festival in October 2001. In September 2001, 9/11 happened. Almost all Middle Eastern events in the Bay Area were canceled. We had a company meeting to discuss should we cancel, and then we, as a collective, we decided that it's in times like these that we actually have to put ourselves forward and share these stories. So we decided to move forward with the festival, and we reached out to other theater companies in the Bay Area and the police, I have to say, to make sure that there's security around the theater. And we got like Theater Bay Area, Intersection for the Arts, all of them wrote letters in support of the festival moving forward, because we needed to feel held by our community. And the festival moved forward, and I think that really put us under a national lens. And I never forget, somebody from the New York Times called me. This had never happened, obviously. And they asked me, like, what do I think about what happened, like 9/11? And I told them, well, U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East has been, ABC, and it's not surprising that it results in, XYZ. And they're like, what? What do you mean? So they didn't agree with me at all. They didn't feel that the U.S. had any responsibility in what was happening in the Middle East, or 9/11, or all this to say, when we tell our stories, it's very different from when other people tell our story. I mean, it's obvious it's an obvious thing, but I actually had to fight to make that case. Tony Kushner wrote about Afghanistan, all the more power to him. But that's his perspective. He doesn't know the first thing about Afghanistan. I don't care how much he, does research or how many consultants he, consulted with. Like, that is his perspective. And in 2001, the night that we opened Reorient was the night that the U.S. started bombing Afghanistan. And we invited an Afghan music group to open that evening for us. Because, because in solidarity with the Afghan people, of course. We don't believe that a whole nation should be punished for, no matter how horrific an incident is, you can't punish a whole nation for it, right? And so we had to, and then when Iraq was invaded, there was more of that, like, producing plays from Iraqi perspectives, because even when those plays were being produced in the U.S., they were from like U.S. veteran perspectives, right, or veterans' families' perspective. Yeah, and so like this idea of telling our stories in our own words is core to Golden Thread, and the idea that there is a Middle Eastern American voice and Middle Eastern American aesthetic, Middle Eastern American perspective that is A, necessary, B, valuable, and aesthetically can help expand what it means to have an American theater. You know, these are I think critical elements of what Golden Thread's work has been about these past few years. New Threads is our new play development arm at Golden Thread. Evren, you formalized that program. You can talk about it a little more. I'll talk about Women's Day. So in 1999, we started two programs, Reorient Festival and What Do the Women Say? Reorient was about showcasing diversity. Women's Day was about showcasing Middle Eastern women artists of various disciplines, not just theater. Bringing together visual artists, dancers, musicians, and theater practitioners in one evening. Again, countering stereotypes, the stereotype of the oppressed, silent Middle Eastern woman. Like, I'm not that. No one in my family is that. So, you know, it boggles my mind when people continue to push that narrative forward and use that narrative to support, you know, terrible political agendas. Yeah. So is there oppression? Yes. Is there misogyny? Yes. But so, and it, you know, it also exists in the US. Like, it's not unique to the Middle East. So, so Women's Day, we started in '99, and both Reorient and Women's Day happened annually for I want to say 10 years, and then we sort of played with programming a little bit after that. You talk about New Threads.
Yes, boss. So yeah, I got involved with Golden Thread. My first production, I think, was 2005. I sort of resisted it for a while, actually. My experience of Middle Eastern theater has been quite different in a way. I am an immigrant, but I look like this, I sound like this, and I think a good deal of the first 10 years in this country was really, I spent a lot of time trying to pass and kind of failing at it miserably. And sort of, so I was very actively not identifying as Middle Eastern. My name is just weird enough that people are like, where is that from? But they don't immediately place me as a Muslim Middle Eastern human. So it took a while for me, and actually Golden Thread and my conversations with Torange and the way in which she welcomes people into space, not as a like, you must agree with me to be in this space, but more as a like, this is a space for you to explore whatever your complicated feelings are about where you're from. Because I think that was the biggest difference with Golden Thread and some of the other theater I was seeing from or about the Middle East was I was feeling a great deal of pressure to sort of make it good and make it, you know, we only tell certain kinds of stories about our people because, and there was real reason for it.
The positive
depictions. Which there was real
yes.
reason for that because the community was under attack in a very literal way. But as an artist, that's just not how I work. So having a space like Golden Thread to explore good, bad, ugly, and everything in between about where I'm from or my perspective on it, and then work through those things towards something positive maybe at the end, is just so much better art, if you think about it. But New Threads for me, by that time, I can't remember if I was getting paid yet, but I was the new works person at Golden Thread. I had a 20-something year of, you know, volunteer work and getting paid very little.
As you do at the beginning.
Yeah, no, it was great. It it was, I mean, like, I got to do a lot of things that I was probably not qualified to do yet, you know, that way. But in 2011, New Threads had existed before, but it wasn't a consistent program. And what I found as a New Works person at the Golden Thread was, even with Reorient, we have only so many production slots, and it's a smaller company now growing a little bit more into maybe medium size slowly, but it's going to take a while, or maybe it doesn't even want to be a big company ever. You don't know, you know. But we did not have the capacity to produce every play. And one of the things that I saw nationally that was lacking was culturally sort of grounded and supportive development opportunities for our writers to figure out how they want to tell our stories. What I would joke about is I could tell when a play was developed in a sort of predominantly white space, because the first 2 scenes would be just exposition, where like 2 Iranians are talking to each other about something that happened in Iran that everyone knows in great detail, giving years and names, and you know, like it just made no, like this is not how people talk. This is bad art, right? There is a way to do exposition. It's just, it can be artful. So in a way for, so that was sort of the impetus behind New Thread, both to be able to tell even more stories from different kind of cultures and perspectives, but also to create a space where we could, without the pressure of production, allow writers and other kind of creative artists to explore how they wanted to tell their stories. And that mostly focused on playwriting, but not exclusively. So there was a lot of adaptation, there was some translation, and it ended up being an amazing also opportunity for us to give space for our actors to develop as well, because new works don't exist in a vacuum. You need directors and actors who know how to work on new work. And New Threads became like this really wonderful pipeline, I think, for a lot of directors from our communities or allies who are, you know, coming into our spaces to find ways to engage with our stories and our work, and find ways that might be specific to support a Middle Eastern writer versus some other writer. There's overlap, but there's cultural specificity. So it's been this thing that's going on now for 14 years, I guess. So, and it's really exciting. And I was the recipient of, it was my play Oriental. That was the last big workshop for New Thread. So it was after 14 years, getting to be the writer and coming benefiting from sort of the generosity of this company that has been my home for 20 plus years at this point.
I really love what you're saying about the need, the desire for complex representation, but not just complex. Like, representation is not just the thing. Like, sure, we can put these faces up there, but we need complex stories that go beyond, that interrogate like our inter-diasporic conversations, and we don't want that. We don't want the actual screen saver to come up. There we go. Okay. And also thinking a lot about how very similarly, you know, I work in you know, Black diasporic traditions, African American diasporic traditions, and African diasporic traditions, and it's the same thing where we are finally at a place where it's like, okay, we really are grateful that we're getting some of these producing opportunities, you know, like but how many more times can we see Raisin in the Sun, and how many more times can we see August Wilson? And like, we are grateful to these folks, but we need more complicated, complex stories where that are reaching larger audiences. And so being able, new plays and nurturing new plays, being immersed in conversations about new plays, providing opportunities to everyone in the theatrical ecosystem to engage with new plays is like where it's at, you know, for diasporic folks, I think.
And also, like, where are you allowed to fail?
Hello.
Right? Experiment and fail, because like, I am now working in the big scary white American theater almost exclusively, right? It took about 10-15 years to really build that career. And I'm so glad I kind of waited a while and had this community home that is still my home. I'm still working there. I was there this year, that's where I went to develop my personal scary play about my mom and my life, right? I'm going to go to Golden Thread. I'm not going to develop that elsewhere. So it's still a really important home, but by the time I got out there and I was having to represent our stories or my artistry to folks who don't know me or who don't come from where I come from, I had failed enough times and had been given enough opportunity to figure out how I want to talk about myself, how I want to talk about my work, how I want to run my rooms in a way that works for me, right? And I see so many artists of color or marginalized, artists coming from any sort of marginalized community, and I include like class conversation in this as well, not just ethnicity and race or immigration status. I feel like we are given opportunity, and then if you fail, well, that's the end of that, right?
That's it.
And
Yeah.
where can you find that home where you have people who are willing to hire you, even if your last show didn't turn out quite as well as you had hoped? Because they believe in your voice that you've learned something and you will do better next time.
That's right.
Right? And that's where like community organizations, community-specific organizations, it is a professional theater company, of course, like Golden Thread, still hold the center of that conversation for me, because that's where we need to go to help us be better at what we do.
That's right. Yeah, for me, it was definitely like Crowded Fire Theater. That was my home that allowed me to experiment, that allowed me to develop my own voice as a director and as a playwright. There were so many opportunities that I got, and support and care, and to be in a professional theater company and be respected as an artist and seen as someone who is skilled was something that just hadn't happened before. And I'd been working independently in the Bay Area for like 10 years, 15 years, even before I joined the company. So, I mean, it's critical to have an artistic home, even if you have to make it yourself. I love that we're also talking about, more than like complex artistry. We're talking about aesthetics, we're talking about development, because I want to talk about your play right now, but I'm going to show this little clip from Reorient, since it's sitting here. Oh, it's like 8 minutes. Do you have an idea? Maybe we just watch like the beginning of it. Okay. And just so you all can have a little sense of what the Reorient Festival, and I might make a cameo in this one. I don't know.
So, in the first few minutes of the interview, I've told you that I work in a bank and that I'm Arab. I wonder what else can I tell you to really lessen my chances of joining the club. I'm also unmarried, without a partner.
Oh, we'll come to that. But first, I need to establish, are you interested in receiving or inflicting punishment at the Grievance Club?
Inflicting. Please.
Good. Because we've recently had a notable rise in the number of requests from receivers to be punished by Muslims and people of Middle Eastern origin.
You see, my family's not religious. No, I wasn't brought up under any religious umbrella whatsoever. Even though all the three main players were President Basra at that time. My sister recently became an evangelical Christian, actually. But I think that's because she moved to Virginia, pretty much. She's been born again. But no, I'm not anything. At all. Born just the once. Me. Will that negatively affect my chances, do you think?
It's possible that being Middle Eastern could put you in an advantageous position.
Well, you don't hear that very often.
This old guy, he asked me to hit him in the flank with his baseball bat, and I did. I swung that bat with such wild abandon, and
11? You're only 8.
They would make an exception for me because of my latent genius. Also because they're short on Syrians and want to show the world how open-minded and not xenophobic they are, because of Brexit. And I would become a member of the Slytherin house.
what? Ew!
I just think they're generally the more interesting group. They get a bad rap, but they're capable of great things. Also, I want to speak Parseltongue.
You want to speak to snakes? That's creepy.
I think speaking to snakes would come in handy in these parts. I could stage all kinds of attacks on ISIS, like order 1 million pythons to charge at them and suffocate them all to death. And on Assad, and on all the Russians and everyone, death by snake.
Don't be violent, Teddy.
I can't help it. It's all I know.
No! No! No, no, no! I have already spoken to Calais about this. I know that my name isn't appropriate in Spanglish and that people are confusing me with a previous person since I'm a replacement, but calling me Chelsea is just temporary until others get used to saying my name. It looks pretty official to me. But that's not my name. This is ridiculous. I am emailing her.
Don't worry, sweetie, your name is safe.
Safe.
I remember my Chelsea days.
Your real name isn't Shelby?
See, what's great about Globetron is it doesn't matter where your name is from or what it means in Spanglish. You are not your name. Here, you are what you do. See, I was a Chelsea, like you are. Then, after 5 years of perfect behavior and stellar performance, I got to be a Shelby. And I will soon be a Chalet. A woman.
I'll just say that that shows sort of the range of stories that are included in Reorient, from you know, a satire, which was the first piece that we saw about a woman signing up in a club so she could inflict pain on clients that pay for that, to what we just ended on, which was a science fiction piece, essentially, to something that is actually about the Syrian war, where the two kids were speaking. So there's a wide range of stories that are presented in an evening of Reorient Festival.
I'd love to talk a little bit about both of y'all. You know, you for a long time you were directors and translators and also playwriting, but now are doing some pivots. And at Torange, I would love to talk about Lili and Majnun and the sort of the story of that play, the development process of that play, how you're working through bringing that story to us here. Yeah.
So Layli and Majnun is the most popular love story in the Middle East. We think that it inspired Shakespeare to write Romeo and Juliet. It's the story of these two kids who meet in school, and so it's set, let me go back. So it's based on real life characters in the 7th century, in Bedouin tribes of the Najd Desert, which is today Saudi Arabia. The text that I used is an epic romance poem written in the 12th century by an Iranian poet, Nizami, who is basically, in Iran, he's known as sort of the master of romance. He has a collection of 5 epics. 3 of them are epic romances. Layli and Majnun is one of them. And my adaptation, essentially, so traditionally these epics are performed solo by a performer, a naqal, which means a narrator, in a public space like a coffee shop or a bazaar or a town square. The naqal would narrate the story, perform all the parts, all the characters, all the voices, and make all the sound effects. So the naqal is a really skilled, amazing performer. So I've taken that tradition of naqali and fused it with ensemble musical theater to create an ensemble version of Naqali with movement and live music. I wasn't sure if this thing that I had in my head would actually work, so first I translated the play. I began by it's 4,000 something verses, so I began by translating verse by verse, and then soon I realized, well, this can be like a 36-hour play if I, go like this. So I shifted and translated some verses that really stood out to me, but then created scenes, right? So the development process included a couple of table readings, discussions. It was a longer text. And then we had a couple of workshops where we explored sort of the physical language of the play, the visuals of the play. Because I was combining this tradition, this ancient tradition, with a contemporary aesthetic of ensemble musicals and movement, I also wanted that reflected in the music and the visual, the production design. So I collaborated with a Bay Area painter and artist, Mokhtar Paki, who is a longtime collaborator of mine. He combined calligraphy, like classical Persian calligraphy, with contemporary graffiti in Iran. And we talked about, in order to sort of create this feeling of a vast desert, that we want a very kind of a barren stage, but and have like just 2 or 3 pieces of scenery that we use in endless ways. But I wanted the material used to be organic material, so it's all made from like fabric and rope, like cotton material and bamboo and wood. And then the music is also basically rooted in Arabic classical maqam, classical music, with Persian classical traditional music. And the composer is actually of Kurdish heritage. And it was interesting because he said he used Kurdish melodies to sort of bridge Arabic and Persian music together. So, and it's performed by an ensemble of 7 actors and 2 musicians. Yeah, it was in development for about 2 years. We first staged it last year for a limited run, and then we've brought it back this year after we had a workshop over the summer where I continued to make changes to the text. And now it's on stage in Richmond, California through November 23rd.
Yeah, if we could take my playwriting class to see that, but that's like a 3-hour drive, y'all. I love hearing about the specificity of all of the elements. I think when we think about, especially my first year playwrights, like we're barely wrapping our heads around the script, right? So to think about music, to think about sound, we've talked about sound a lot, but to think about music, sound, to think about working within a lineage of a certain kind of diasporic storytelling, all of those things I think are things that I want us to be thinking about as you're writing your plays. So, but I just love the specificity of that. And do you want to say I'm really fascinated by the thinking about the physical vocabulary and the dancing. And can you talk just a little bit more about how you worked through adding those layers? And then we'll talk about Oriental for a little bit, and then we're heading towards some final questions. Yeah.
So working with an ensemble, so basically I gathered actors who are singers, movers, and creators. So actors that you can you know, basically you throw in an idea and then they improvise scenes. You know, that's the process. So in our first physical workshop, we invested a lot of time building an ensemble. At the time, we had, I think, 9 or 10 performers in the room. And we, you know, explored basically our physical bodies in space, how we each move. Everyone shared skill sets. I'm a fan of working with bamboo sticks. So I shared exercises with bamboo sticks. We had clowns in the room. They shared their clowning skills. We had dancers in the room, composers and musicians in the room who are also actors. So there was like a sharing of skills. And then we took the text and improvised scenes from it, and just to explore how can we embody this story, right? And I'm very lucky because I have a long relationship with a space in Richmond that is founded and run by Iranian theater artists. So I was able to do my exploration and sort of ultimately the staging of the play in the same space. So we kept building. And then I have long relationships with my collaborators. So Lisa Tatiosian, who is the choreographer, you know, we would talk about what is this, you know, we sort of, our ground was the poetry, right? So what is being conveyed in this scene, in these like lines of poetry, and then based on that, Lisa and I would kind of riff on, you know, what might it look like in terms of a dance. The celebration dance is is basically a birthday party, and what might that entail in, you know, 7th century Bedouin tribes, you know? So we have like goat roasting, because part of it jumped right into the goat roasting. Part of one of the elements of musical theater is this world building, right? So it was really important to me that, especially in the introductory scenes of the play, to, you know, convey what is the environment in which the story is being told, right? So this idea of this desert and these Bedouin tents and the tribes and the interrelationship and the status and all of that. So they're in the dialogue, but they're also in the songs. So we had, we had a lot of fun dreaming up scenes and movements and dances, and then the next couple of workshops were about sort of refining what is essential, what needs to be cut. And I will say that in my adaptation of this story, historically, Majnun, the male character, like the Romeo character, is the main character of the story, and the story is known as like his love story. But in reading the original Nizami, I discovered that the female character, Layli, is also a poet and an outspoken character in the story, which in a lot of scholarly writing about the piece has sort of been silenced or I would say even eliminated from scholarly discussion. So I decided that I'm going to focus my adaptation on Layli's experience of the story. And that helped me sort of edit the play to really bring focus to that. And I'll just end by saying two things. One is, given everything that's been happening these past 2-3 years in the world, I really needed, I created this bubble of love poetry for myself and hid inside it because I couldn't deal with the reality of the world. And I'll say that if I didn't have it, I probably wouldn't have survived these like 2 years. It's that protective, and I did feel protected by it, and I also felt protected by the community that came together to create this, because you know, isolation essentially is a death sentence, right? So I couldn't just hide myself in a bubble, because then I would feel isolated and lonely. I needed to have community at the same time. So I'll say that those two things, you know, the inspiring love story and the community, those are sort of, you know, the tools for survival and resilience, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just want to echo what you're saying about world building as a methodology for like caring for ourselves and caring for others. I think one of the gifts of being able to be in a department called performance play and design is that a bunch of us are coming together thinking about how world building in games and world building in theater have much to say to one another. And we're also imagining new possibilities for, you know, how it is that we're thinking about the world that we live in right at this moment. And so, and I just deeply, deeply feel the, next year, I've recently gotten funding for the Iris Lab to develop a cohort of Black feminist theater maker world builders. And so I just believe very deeply in that methodology of bringing what you have to the circle and insisting whatever is created from that, and that is part of the insistence that we offer to the world, is by working in that world building philosophy. So I just thank you for adding that layer to this conversation. So Evren, I just want to ask you briefly about Oriental, your new play, Oriental, 1,001 Ways to Tie Yourself in Knots. And then I have one more question, and then we're going to move to our Q&A.
Yeah, Oriental sort of came out, I'm a director, fairly established at this point. I've been doing it for 20 plus years. But I've always been writing secretly, I feel like. And I actually go back to, I was an intern at Trinity Rep, and Paula Vogel was the professor of playwriting there and was a resident artist at Trinity Rep. And I like weaseled my way into running sound for her workshop for a Long Christmas Ride Home. And I was like, can I have lunch with you? Of course she said yes, because she's that person. And she asked me, she's like, do you write? And I was like, no, English is my second language. I don't. And she said, well, that's why you should, because you actually hear the language as it is rather than meaning. And I like held that in my head for 20 years, I think, before I was willing to sort of tell people that I do that. But it came through translation first from Turkish, and really loved doing that, and then adaptation, and then Oriental is really the first full length that I've stepped into. And it came out of Eric Ting at Cal Shakes, RIP, not Eric, but Cal Shakes. Eric is doing great. Commissioned me to adapt 1,001 Nights as a director, and that's pretty common. That's always the story we're given. So I had some big feelings about having to do that, but it was a really big check, so I said yes. And then I brought in Layla Buck, who's a brilliant Lebanese-American playwright, to collaborate with me on it. So we were co-creating it. And it turned into this amazing story collecting exercise from Middle Eastern, North African, and South Asian women, which was run by Rashma Razvi. Did I say her last name right? I did, right? And then Layla and I we included those stories in it, and this play, 1,001 Nights, a retelling, was supposed to premiere in summer of 2020 at Cal Shakes, and like the rest of the world was canceled. And then when we got back to it 5 years later, when we were approached, the world was totally different. It was such a of-the-moment play. We just couldn't find our ways into it. But Layla and I are the best of friends and collaborators, so we sort of separated the play and took our sections, although our hands are in each other's work so much. So she has I think, originally conceived and written with credit on the play, because she's in it as much as I am in certain ways. And the play that I ended up being really interested in exploring is actually about making a play about 1,001 Nights. I had been really sort of having a lot of experiences up at OSF, all over the American theater, where I felt quite alone, and I felt, as a creator, I felt quite forced into certain boxes that were not coming from me. I felt like I was creating a lot of my work in response to something rather than from my own gut and thoughts. And in the way that Middle Eastern art works, the only way I knew how to write about that or make from that was just a farcical comedy. And I do have, it used to be a notebook, now it's a note app thing, of whenever I'm like pitching or having meetings and a collaborator or a donor or an artistic leader says something really sideways to me that hurts, and sometimes you can face up to it and fight it, or sometimes that's just not worth it. So I found that like being able to write that somewhere and just like keep it has been like a survival tactic of sorts, actually. And then all of a sudden, once I came up with this idea of a Turkish queer American, now American immigrant artist being commissioned by a fancy theater to adapt 1001 Nights and then hating it, all of a sudden all my notes of things I was said that were said to me became relevant. And it was been this like really beautiful reclaiming of terrible things that have been said to me and putting them in the play and making fun of them. So it became this really meta, weird play that I love. Torange has been the dramaturg on it. I got to work on it as part of my Iris Lab fellowship this year, as a residency here in Santa Cruz, and got a 2-week amazing workshop at Golden Thread with Elizabeth Carter directing and an amazing group of actors to just like figure out what the heck it is. And because I'm a director too and a designer, it is a visual, physical play. It pulls from a lot of Middle Eastern storytelling traditions, including Karagöz, which is a shadow puppetry. That's an Ottoman, all of the region's cultures have it, Turkish sort of puppet tradition. There's a lot of Ortoyun, which is the Turkish version of that solo storytelling element that Torange was talking about. A lot of that is in there, and there's a lot of making fun of it. There's a lot of sort of going all the way into Orientalism. The title is selected Oriental, or 1001 Ways to Tie Yourself in Knots is selected to be a little edgier and annoy people because I felt very much forced into an Oriental corner in having to tell this story. But then, as is the case with these old folk tales or classics, once you're in there, you realize why they are classics and have survived for 2,000 years, because they're awesome. And it is actually super feminist. It's, you know, it's sort of has incredible, it's really raunchy. It starts with a giant orgy. Like, it's like this crazy thing. And I wanted to find a way to put all that in there, and it was really lovely to put myself in the play, not myself as an actor, but myself as a character, because the ways in which I found out about these things, the character can find out about these things. And the ending of the play really came because the first thing I wrote when I was given the assignment was actually the story about my mom, written in the style of 1001 Nights storytelling. And then I kept cutting it out of the play, because I felt like that's not what the play was about. And once I got back to it, I was like, oh, that's the actual play I wanted to write. So it's like the character in the play sort of goes through a very long process to get back to the actual story about his mom he wants to tell. So it ended up being this really beautiful, and you know, I'm hoping for more workshops and continue to develop it. But I do have to say the Iris Lab experience has been such a huge, incredibly supportive moment in that development, because that, I mean, resource is amazing, thank you. You know, the award is great. But really the sort of 10, 11 days I got to have on a beach by myself.
Nobody's mad at it.
Yeah, after, with sort of real dramaturgical support and, you know, feedback from LisaMarie and all of my collaborators, that I could take in and like churn this piece that is so personal. So I kind of had to like go away after the workshop and be alone and see what was actually inside me and get that on the page. And that's been like a huge, huge thing for the play.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you were part of our inaugural class.
It's been amazing.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm gonna actually shift us to Q&A. I think if anything, I would say if you can offer any kind of why you keep going. I feel like the whole conversation has been about why and why you keep going. I would love to hear that, but I'm going to open it to our audience right now and see, or online, if folks have any questions for us. Do you have anything that you would like to ask Torange or Evren while we are here? They're going to bring you a mic. Or I can, oh yeah, there we go.
Hi there. I have a real question about how you write physicality, because I'm like one of those people who like visualize movement a lot, and so I'm wondering how you get that on a page, or how you describe it in a way that makes sense.
I love that we're starting with such a specific question. That's a beautiful question. Thank you. I'm a director, as I said, first and foremost, so I see worlds. Like, I see the thing as much as I hear the thing. So that has been a real journey for me as well. I used to, I think, write a lot of direction into my plays, where all the stage directions were like super tight and left no room for error. You couldn't misunderstand what my intention was. And then I remembered after a while how much I hate that when writers do that to me as a director, right? But it was a really important part to get it on the page. And now my trick, I think, is, and this was, the workshop was super helpful, having an Elizabeth Carter, who was the director, and Torange there. They could reflect to me what they're seeing, which might have been different from what I saw and put on the page. And anytime I realized that there were other opportunities, I took it out. But I found it really helpful to put it into the stage directions of what exactly I'm seeing in the creative process. And if there are certain things I do want to be in the space, sometimes I actually write stage directions like, a song plays, maybe it's something like this, or maybe it's something like this, or maybe it's something like this. Like, I'll actually offer a range of options in my stage directions to help create clarity of where my gut is, but also not feel like I am limiting the generative energy of my collaborators. Because again, you know, if you want to really control the thing, there's many solo writing exercises and mediums you can take. Theater is a collaborative exercise. So for me, I always want to be in space with people who are smarter than me and know more and have better instincts that I can activate with my writing. I hope that's helpful. But I do think not being afraid to put it on the page when you're beginning is really important to me, because I find about for other people's generative energy and creativity. And again, I'm a director who thinks communally, I'm a director who thinks about space. So I don't know, as long as it's not a stationary act, as long as I don't know it's a forward-leaning act, and it's an inviting, like, I don't know, please fill the space to your collaborator, you'll be surprised at how much they bring and then how much you find out you know once there is something. So I just want to say, I want to add on to Torange is that I don't know, I think we have a tendency to, in a very Western, masculine, colonized way, really love knowing. We love to know everything, and we think data is our friend when it's only a portion of what one needs to make great things. But I will say that if you're finding yourself in a place where you say, I don't know, and that keeps you from making things or doing things, that's not helpful. I think, I don't know, but I'm gonna go, well, this person is doing really interesting work. Can I be in their room? I mean, that's how I ended up getting myself to run sound for Paula Vogel and Oscar Eustace's room at Trinity Rep, because I was like, these people seem to know what they're doing and they're incredible. I just want to be in the room. And then that led to a conversation. That led to me watching Oscar Eustace do dramaturgy as a director in a very specific way and being like, oh, that actually is so much better than any of the dramaturgy classes I took that were telling me to do dramaturgy this way. This actually works for me. I'm gonna try to see the next time I direct a new play doing it that way. So again, I was open in my not knowing, and I was able to receive and lean forward. And I'm a person who, the last thing I'll say is, I know we're in a university, but like some people really learn by reading, some people really learn by studying, and I do all those things, but I'm a learner by doing person. I gotta like be in the room to figure it out, make a mistake, be like, don't do that again. I wish I learned what not to do without making the mistake. That would save me quite a bit of energy, pain, but I'm just not the one. I really, truly, I have a belief that I'm going to be the exception a lot of times. Like, if I do that, it's going to work out. And then you learn that there's a reason why people tell you not to do that, you know. You got to be a little full of yourself in this career, I guess. But anyway, like, so I'm a person, when I don't know, I got to find ways to do the thing to get to knowing. Does that make sense? But again, like, I don't know is not a problem, especially as a young artist, my God. Like, if you knew, I'd be more nervous.
I think we have time for like one more question. So if anybody feels anything deep in their belly that they just want to ask. Andrea? No. No? Okay. Okay. I would love to hear a why, and then I will say some thank yous. Yeah.
The first thing I'll say about the why is I wish I knew how to stop sometimes. You know, like because it's not an easy life. Theater making in America is not the most comfortable life. It's not the simplest life. It's a life of committing to churning in the things that are uncomfortable. And I think there are a lot of people in the world who are comfortably in their comfort zones. And I have selected some career for myself where I will be constantly a little bit uncomfortable and doing things that I don't know how to do on the edge of my learning, right? So there are days where I'm like, man, I wish I could stop doing this. There was a way for me to do that. But it is a bit of a compulsion, but it's also I think theater gives me the opportunity to churn the thing in metaphor. Because, I mean, Torange, sort of, you talked about all the awfulness we're living through right now. And I remember very specifically, after this was, I can't even remember the year, but a while back, the shooting at the Pulse Gay Club in Florida. And it turned out that it was a Afghan-American young man who did it, and I knew immediately, I was like, he's gonna be queer, and he was. And so I was just like torn apart by this. And then a friend of mine happens to be one of the opinion editors in the New York Times, which is really exciting. So she reached out to me because she knows I'm queer and Middle Eastern and identify as Muslim, being like, do you want to write an opinion piece? And I remember being like, no, I don't have anything to say. I have all the questions. What I can say is like, this sucks. I am hurting. And I feel for these people and this person. And I don't know what to do with that, right? Which is in itself not what they're looking for, right? The article they ended up running was about like anti-gay sentiment in Muslim communities and how harmful that is. Like that's what they were looking for. And I could feel it, right? Like that my whatever artistic, heart-first, pain-centered in that moment, writing wasn't going to be it. Well, I feel like I've been churning that across many productions, that pain, that question, that like, is there a different way? How do we get to the other side of this? But none of those productions are directly about the Pulse shooting. It's not about, you know what I mean? I sometimes need, as a person, to be able to look at a thing in metaphor or from the side, to be able to get to what the heck is happening with me. And what I found is if I can churn that, other people see their churning in that work. And it like passes the help forward, right? Like it, like whatever is working for me will work for someone else if you commit to it and can do it with care and grace. So I think that's really like, it is a bit of a survival, or like it's how I know how to churn the world right now, is in these rehearsal rooms, making stories with other people who are hurting. With joy.
Amen.
Though.
Amen.
With a lot of laughter
Yeah.
and joy.
Do you have any final word that you want to say before I?
This may not be what you want to hear.
You can give us all the things.
But I will say, you know, if there's something else you can do, do it. If you can't live without it,
That's right.
that's when you become an artist.
Yeah, that's right.
That's when you become a writer. That's when you make theater. If you can live without it, do it, because it's, you know, a hell of a life.
Amen. Best life, best life. So I just want to give a couple thank yous. Thank you to John and Juan, who were running our stream. Thank you to Colleen Jennings, who's our production lead. Thank you to Luna Kamitan, the Iris Lab research assistant. Alejandra Rivas, the Iris Lab artistic associate. Thea Rogers at HowlRound, Paul Fortino from IIS. And I want to remind folks about tomorrow is a masterclass that Torange and Evren will be leading, masterclass theatrical play, staging, language, and poetry. And I hope you'll join us for that. It'll be in this very room from 1:30 to 3:30. And Evren, Torange, thank you so much for being here. And I'm just so appreciative of all your work and everything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.